I want to introduce Liz Sell. She's our presenter, and many of you saw her bio in the email that went out. Liz has devoted her entire career to energizing audiences to take action for diverse causes, from climate change and environmental issues to child hunger and poverty. For nearly 4 years, she's worked as the storyteller at No Kid Hungry, using the written word, photo, and video to convey the impact of hunger on children in this country. She's an experienced trainer, having trained hundreds of No Kid Hungry grantees, Americorps volunteers, and youth activists each year in storytelling. She's also won some awards for her work, including Telly, Webby, and PR Week awards. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Sell.
Thanks, Leah. All right, so we're just gonna make sure we're good to go on everything. Looks good? Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna, thanks everybody for joining us. Let's see. Okay, so I'm not gonna go too much into who I am since Leah did such a beautiful job already. So I thought maybe we'd just talk over the agenda first. So obviously we're gonna talk about storytelling, and I've broken it into sort of 4 different buckets. We're going to think about the elements of storytelling. So what are the components of a good story? We're going to talk about the types of stories, because there's really a lot of different types of stories you can tell. We're going to think through your objectives and how to identify your objectives and think about your audience. And then we're going to talk about how to actually put those stories into something and take it out into the world. So yeah, that's me, in case you're wondering. There I am at the Space Needle, and there on the right I'm at work developing a video that you won't be seeing today, but if you're interested, it's called Food is Medicine, and it's for No Kid Hungry. So I wanted to introduce myself a little further just in showing some street cred by showing a video that I developed for No Kid Hungry about the Blackfeet Indian in Montana. This is just a short sort of video to show you guys some street cred. So this is a video I did about the Blackfeet Indian Reservation in northern Montana, and about the work No Kid Hungry did to feed kids in this community.
There's this feeling when you cross that borderline that you're home. Families on a reservation have many struggles and challenges. It's our home. It's where our family is. It's where our ancestors are. It's where our grandmas are buried.
It's hard to say, but there is a lot that go without eating around here. Some of the kids go to school that don't eat from the night before. Like, our lunch might be their last meal. I want them to have a good Christmas every year. I want them to have their costumes. I want, for Halloween, I want them to know that there's going to be a big Thanksgiving dinner. So I give up a lot. I do. I want them to be doctors. I want them to be lawyers, and if that's possible, then I'm going to help them as hard as I can. I'll sacrifice, I'll work double jobs if I have to pay for them to go to school.
There's certain things we try to hide from them. There's certain times we try to hide from them. We're totally, completely out of money. Try to make ends meet.
When I'm going to the store and I say, Mom, can I get this? Can I get that? And I tell them, well, is it a necessity or is it just for luxury?
I want them to do better than we're doing because they'll have a better life than I had.
So, are you going to, they won't be able to see this. This won't show up. Okay.
When I brought it to the teachers, a lot of hesitation, but the teachers were all for it because they knew how hard it is to teach kids who are hungry.
I can see that they are more alert, more eager to learn, more eager to engage and participate.
It helps because then, you know, you can just mainly focus on dinner. You know, that's the biggest thing is when they get home, I got to make sure they have snacks and dinner every night.
You know, I think in the end, to me, every person would love the opportunity to have a job, to provide for their family, to give their kids what they maybe didn't have. I think we all have that same goal. And these kind of collaborations here, I think are a good model for people to see that, you know, people can work together to make a difference in the lives of people. Because in the end, it's about the lives of people.
Okay. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody. Okay. Leah, can you see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Marvelous. So this is going to be a video-heavy webinar because I'm a video producer, so I get really excited about really good storytelling videos. But never fear, these are sort of geared towards having you guys understand structure of story and messaging and objectives, and then we'll get into storytelling beyond video. Obviously, I'm trying to be mindful of everybody's capacity. So the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is sort of my favorite activist video. I think it's a really good example of storytelling, and what's an amazing fact about this video is it's entirely silent. So I'm going to hopefully share my screen again, and we're going to watch it. All right. Hey, it's working. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, that one always gets me. I'm a big sucker for that. So that was from Get Up Australia. Get Up Australia was working to achieve marriage equality in Australia, and that video was wildly successful. It is a great example of a good storytelling video because you can really see, you understand who the characters are, you see a beginning, middle, and end, and then the most important part of an activist video is that it has a clear call to action. So that is one that I love to show people to kind of get them warmed up and thinking about storytelling in the activist space. And so we're going to do one more video before we get into the real meat of the storytelling content. And I wanted to get you guys thinking about videos in the vegan world. So first we're going to talk about why we use stories. So one way, they do a lot of things, but one of the most important things stories do is they help you understand complex problems. It can be, it's one thing to talk about your goal, whatever that is, whether it's getting somebody to completely switch to veganism, to become a vegan for a week, to eat less meat, or whatever it is your aim is. When you're talking about such a complex issue, using a story can really help be the wrapping around that issue and help people understand what's at the problem at hand. And using a story helps you get to yes quicker. And then finally, the biggest reason we use stories is that they help build empathy and they help inspire. And when you build empathy with your audience and you inspire your audience, that's going to get you to your ultimate goal of awareness and action, whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do. So I think that the following video is a really amazing example of vegan storytelling. So we can't obviously watch the whole movie, but I think that the trailer is a great sort of thought starter. So without further ado.
He's worked hard all his life. He bought this place to supplement his retirement. We hadn't been making any money. Balloon notes were coming due on tractors. Now I'm telling him, oh, heck no, you ain't taking that red trailer up the road anymore. We're not selling any more calves. You send that red trailer up the road one more time, I'm following it. I'll go to the slaughterhouse if I have to. And it was a process for me because, I love my husband. I didn't want to just say, too bad, you go up the road.
Could you look an animal in its face and simply say to it that your appetite is more important than its suffering?
There were some death cliffs out there. There are cliffs you're running on the side. If you trip and fall, you're dead. So that's pretty exhilarating.
I don't know what a typical vegan is anymore. I think that sort of 70s version of the tree-hugging, crystal-powered, Birkenstock-wearing unicorn rider is sort of nonsense and has been for a long time.
This idea of eating animal product, nothing more harmful than that shit. What's more harmful than destroying the planet and taking all the resources and then poisoning yourself?
Hi, my name is Genesis, and I'm 8 years old. I'm vegan and an activist. I'm here for a purpose. My purpose is to get the whole world to go vegan. Thank you for helping me.
Children have a natural connection with other animals. And then as time goes, we become acculturated to accept certain things that don't feel right. We come to believe that it's okay for cruelty to become normal.
Ever since I jumped in the cab of that truck and started driving it, it's pretty cool. I feel pretty badass.
When a person goes on a plant-based diet, pretty soon they realize this isn't the extreme end of their diet exploration. This is just the beginning of it.
Vegan food is accessible. It's not a weird out there thing.
I'm 65 years of age, and I ride my bike all over LA still. I'm in great shape, and I've been to my high school reunion, and I can tell you, it's better to be vegan.
I'm gonna crush you like a little bug, but I don't crush bugs because I'm vegan.
Oh, that is just really strong storytelling right there. So I would just encourage you guys to watch that movie in its entirety, just for inspiration alone. It can really help you think about how you want to frame your own story, if you are thinking that you're going to use your story to inspire your audiences. And we'll get more into that. So we a lot of storytellers kind of break stories up into a few different categories. And because stories are about people in the world, and the world is complex and people are complex, you can't really fit anything into just clean buckets, but you can sort of think of stories as falling into a couple of overlapping buckets. So we think about solution stories. These are stories that have a clear, you tell the story, and at the end you demonstrate the solution to that story. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. And then we think about sort of need stories, and stories of need demonstrate why something needs to change. They really can show the problem well. Stories about failure are a fabulous way of showing the problem, and I'm going to show you some examples. I'll show you an example of that. It can be really inspiring to show failure, and in the same vein, success as well. So showing something is successful can mean that can really illustrate that you're just a few steps away from replicating that success in other places. So before I actually start this next video, I'm going to just sort of say, after we watch this video, we're going to talk about where Buddy's story fits in these categories, and it's definitely not going to be mutually exclusive to just one, so keep in mind, you might kind of, as you're watching Buddy's story, think about whether it's a solution and need, failure and success, where it kind of fits in that. Okay, so there we go. Cool. So that was from Mercy for Animals, and that's a great story. We're going to take a quick poll thinking about Buddy's story. Leia's going to send out a poll that basically asks where does Buddy's story fit in those buckets, and you can actually only click one, I think, but you can think about where it fits in the strongest of the buckets. No? Okay, so Leia's about to tell us the results.
All right, everybody. So the results are in, and need and success are both out in first place. We have 42% voted for need, 45% voted for success, and 13% voted for solution, with 0% voting for failure.
How's that fit? That was great. You guys are all smarty pantses. So yeah, I think that Buddy's story is a really cool example of need and success, and even solution, right? Because they give this cow a home, and it shows that, you know, we can create this humanitarian place for all creatures to live. So I think Buddy's story is a great one that fits into a couple of different buckets. But again, it's really great because it has a very clear hero in Buddy. You see him, you go along the story, right? So they find him on the side of the road, and there's a rescue operation, and then ultimately there he is rescued, and Mercy for Animals provides him with a safe space. And then there's a clear call to action, right? So if you support Buddy's story and you want other animals to live like this, then keep them off your plate. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a failure example, and so this is actually from No Kid Hungry, where I work, and so I think this is a great example of failure because, so I met Dr. Jimena Garcia in Topeka, Kansas a couple years ago, and Jimena is a hunger activist. She cares immensely about children, and during the school year, she was volunteering at her local elementary school, helping out the kids who were hungry by doing things like getting together a food pantry and weekend food for the kids and stuff like that. And she knew that when summer rolled around, those kids were not going to have food anymore because they relied on school breakfast and school lunch and after school meals, all provided by the school, which during the summer shuts down. So Jimena looked into opening a summer meals site for kids, and she did all the paperwork. She found a church right across the street from the school. She found volunteers to staff it. She found a chef to cook the food. She had everything all lined up, and so she was ready to launch this summer meals site. But then the federal government actually told her that she couldn't because according to the current law, the area didn't qualify for a summer meals site. So unfortunately, she wasn't able to open her site because there was not going to be any federal reimbursement. Clearly, this is a woman who is a hunger activist in this community. She's trying to open a summer meals site on the same street as the school where she was volunteering during the school year, where she knows hungry children go. And the federal government is telling her that she can't open a summer meals site on that very same street because there aren't hungry children there. Well, clearly, that is false. So we use this story as a really great example of the need to make changes to the summer meals program because it shows that the bureaucracy of the program is broken and outdated, and so it's a really great example of a failure story that we're using to ignite change. And when we, just sort of as a side note, when No Kid Hungry sent this story out in our email program, we got an overwhelming response from people, calls and emails about her story and how people could help. So it's a great example of how failure can inspire your audience. So I've already given it away that failure is Jimena's story fits into failure. But again, I think that it also does demonstrate the need to. So these aren't like mutually exclusive, but good ways to sort of help you develop a framework as you talk about the story you're going to tell. So let's talk about the elements of the story. So first of all, you need to set the scene, right? Like you need to root your story in a place so that it's relatable to everybody. And then you're going to need a character. So we saw Buddy. He was our character. We saw Jimena. She was our character. In the silent video, you see that the gay couple are the characters, but you don't actually see the one who it's all really about, right? So that was really clever. And then you see a plot. That's the story arc. That's what happens. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And somewhere in that plot, usually kind of towards the end or the middle, is the conflict. That's the obstacle your hero is going to encounter. And then at the end, you're going to come to the theme, right? So you're going to think about the theme. So what's learned? What are you, like, if a story is sort of ultimately pretty boring if it doesn't have a message. So we're going to watch this video called I Was Lovin' It. And I think this is a great example of strong storytelling from the vegan world. Moving back to the vegan world.
High cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart attacks. Tonight, make it vegetarian.
Cool. So that was from PCRM. There we go. So PCRM has some really great videos, by the way, if you ever want to go get inspired. I think they're one of the strong storytellers in the vegan world. So talking about setting, so you see that the setting is in a morgue. So you already have like a very dark and despair-laden story right there. And the character is the dead guy holding the hamburger. And so the plot, you see the plot really quickly, right? So you don't need to necessarily see the plot to understand what the plot is, right? So he ate too many hamburgers and he ended up in the morgue. The conflict was the meat eater's diet. The theme was essentially, if you're going to choose that path, you're going to end up facing the consequences. And I thought that like the crying wife and the doctors in the background and the sort of dramatic music all really added to the elements of storytelling there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about audience. It's really important anytime you're doing any kind of storytelling to identify your audience before you even start, right? So you want to be thinking about who you're going to be writing or producing for before you get to developing your story. So who is your audience? Are they lawmakers? Is it people on social media? Do you have an email following? Is it somebody on the street? Like, how are you going to develop this story based on who they are? And then how can they relate and identify? So, something like the message that works with legislators is going to resonate very differently with a man on the street or your social media audience. People are motivated, have different motivations. And then, so where are they again? So once you know where your audience is, then you can develop the right story and the right storytelling vehicle to tell that story. And then after you've identified your audience, you want to think about your objectives, right? So your objectives are going to help you understand what your call to action is going to be. So, you try to have one objective. Sometimes there's a little overlap, but I wanted to kind of give you a sense of some different objectives that might be that you guys might be after. So raising awareness is a completely legit objective, right? So like if you get somebody to pay attention and you just have them help them understand the problem, then you're raising their consciousness, and that's really important. But maybe you want that to go a little bit farther, and so your objective is to actually motivate them to take action. Or maybe it's something a little more nuanced, and it is really just changing their attitudes. Maybe just in conversation with somebody on the street, you're trying to get them to understand a slightly different perspective, and that's a totally acceptable objective too. So when we think about stories, we kind of think about them using what some people call a recipe for inspiration. And so I'm going to get into that a little deeper, but basically it is you show the problem, you demonstrate the solution, and you have a call to action. So thinking back to that video we just watched, I was loving it. They did all of that really quickly and really effectively, right? So they showed the problem, right? He's a meat eater. They demonstrated the solution. More in their call to action, they demonstrated the solution that was basically like eat a vegan diet. And their call to action eat a vegan diet. So we're going to talk about this recipe for inspiration, show the problem, demonstrate the solution, call to action, through watching this video, which is another example of a great vehicle for storytelling that sort of uses the recipe for inspiration. Okay.
Hi, my name is Martha. I'm a beluga whale. I lived with my pod, swimming together for miles and miles in the wide open ocean. But my life was changed forever when I was captured. I don't know who they were or why they took me, but I never saw my family again. I was put in a small concrete tank. I was scared and alone. SeaWorld wanted me to have babies, but prison is no place. So each time I did, my babies died shortly afterward. And it happened again and again. But not with Grayson. He was beautiful and perfect. I wanted him to be near me like I was to my mom. But the SeaWorld people took him away from me. I think about him all the time and hope he's okay. In my dreams, I'm swimming with him and with the rest of my pod in the ocean, with no walls to close us in or separate us. And we're together, swimming free the way belugas were meant to. But then I remember that I'm still trapped. I don't have the freedom to choose what to do, but you do. Please, don't go to SeaWorld or other marine parks that keep wild animals captive for profit. Thank you.
So that was from PETA. That was incredibly moving. That one really got me. So I'm thinking about that recipe for inspiration. We talk about that. That's a great example of sort of hitting all of the buckets. It talked about the problem. The problem is that these wild animals are taken into captivity and mistreated for humans' enjoyment. The solution is don't do that anymore, and also don't go to SeaWorld if you're a member of the general public. And then the call to action is clear. Do not go to SeaWorld, right? And so thinking about, thinking back to sort of where that fits in the need, failure, solution, success. So that's definitely, they definitely show you the solution to the problem, right? Let's shut down these animal parks. And then, but really it's a failure story too, because Martha, albeit animated creature, is still in captivity at the end of the story. So it's really important in storytelling to clearly show the problem for your audience. Why should they care? What are the challenges standing in the way of? So with the Martha story, they really hit it home with the animal mistreatment, and then the challenges standing in the way of the goal was the existence of places like SeaWorld. And then demonstrate the solution. So you want to make sure you're showing how you're going to solve the problem and how it'll improve people's lives. So how will you solve the problem? You shut down SeaWorld. You stop eating meat. And how will that improve people's lives? Animals will no longer be mistreated. People will live longer and healthier lives. So those are sort of solutions that you demonstrate in your storytelling. And so going back to those objectives we talked about a little bit earlier. So you want to keep your objectives in mind when you're getting to developing your call to action. So your objectives fall in sort of some general buckets, and I threw out a few, but I'm sure there are many, many more that you guys have. So raising awareness, motivating action, changing attitudes are those objectives. And then your call to action can be a lot of things. I just threw out a couple, but it might be share online, pledge to eat a vegan diet for 1 week, tell Congress or state legislators or someone to do such and such, or even it's like attend our event. That's a perfectly acceptable call to action. But really, you don't want to be we do, in some cases, talk to our audiences without having a clear call to action, and that can be sort of thought of as engagement. But generally, if you are talking to your audience, you should have a clear call to action, unless you're trying to keep them just to stay engaged. But that sort of depends on how frequently you're talking to them. So I wanted to show another video that I think is a really great example of vegan storytelling, and it's super short, super concise. It's done almost entirely through text, but it's not overly heavy. Clear beginning, middle, and end, and then also a great call to action. What? It's okay, I'm just going to Google it. Hopefully nothing creepy comes up. Okay, that's not working. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Figure this out. Okay. Try this.
While Liz is looking for this video, just want to remind you all that if you have any questions, I've definitely been jotting some down and that I'm going to ask Liz at the end of the presentation. But if you do have them, feel free to send them. There's a chat function on the dashboard that you can just send out, and it'll come directly to me. Or at the end, I will unmute folks. But we will have a time for questions. And looks like we found the video.
Okay, so turns out that the video has gone private. I don't really know why or what the motivation was there, but I am not going to show you that video anymore. I'm sorry I talked it up for no purpose. So anyway, let's talk about vehicles for storytelling. So you can kind of think of them, again, in a couple of different ways. So there's written stories, there's multimedia stories, and there's in-person stories. Just for the sake of a webinar, I've already shown you guys a lot of multimedia stories because they're great, effective storytelling tools, and videos are fun. But we're going to talk more about all three. So written stories, they fall into three main categories, depending on what kind of audience you're working with, but mostly there's email. If you have an email program, if you have email subscribers, I think a great way to stay in touch with your network is collecting emails. So anytime you can, you should be. Especially if that kind of falls into your goals of engagement. And then social, if you have social media platforms, that's another way to be contacting people. And then direct mail, so good old-fashioned direct mail, which is sort of a dying art these days. So we're going to talk about social media first. I think that you should always look to others for inspiration in social media, and not necessarily just in the vegan world, not necessarily just in the activist world, but sort of all over. There's great storytelling. I think that Humans of New York is kind of the king when you think about good storytelling. Follow them on Instagram, follow them on Facebook, and read through how they do storytelling and see some of the sort of things that they're doing that you like, and steal those ideas. That's completely acceptable. Don't steal their language, but steal their ideas. So two charities that I have like a big crush on when it comes to storytelling and social media in particular, Pencils of Promise, organization that does education initiatives in the developing world. So a lot of what they do is build schools in the developing world, and they have great storytelling. So I definitely follow them on Facebook and on Instagram if you're interested in doing storytelling via social media, because Pencils of Promise will give you some great cues. Charity Water is kind of the big one that everybody looks to. Charity Water is just super hip and really good at storytelling. So No Kid Hungry always looks at what Charity Water is doing, and I think pretty much most people do. You might want to look at what we're doing on No Kid Hungry. That's see what I've been up to. Mercy Corps is another one that we follow. Sometimes Doctors Without Borders. I think as we're going through this presentation, you have kind of a sense of the bones of storytelling. Looking to other genres is a really useful tool to then take those learnings and bring them back to your own world. So if you're doing an email program, or if you're reaching out to folks via email in any way, that's a great time to tell stories. So I pulled up 2 emails that I worked on for No Kid Hungry, just to kind of give you a sense of what it looks like. So these are heavily designed because we have a design team, but you don't need to have that necessarily. Just good old-fashioned text, as long as it's a good story, can be really engaging. So, one story we told was about a school in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where No Kid Hungry funded these little red wagons. And because of these little red wagons, the school was able to bring healthy breakfasts to the classroom, and it did such an amazing job at ending childhood hunger because then the kids had school breakfast. The great thing about that story is that it's something that's tangible that everybody can understand. Everybody was a kid once, and we all either had a little red wagon or coveted our friends' little red wagons. So it's something that you can kind of use as a good hook. Another story that we often tell is one about Dr. Rita Bishop. She's a superintendent in Virginia, and she was working late in her office one night, and she had to close the schools for 4 days because of a snowstorm. That night, the phone rang, and a little voice on the line said, "Lady, are you going to open school tomorrow?" She was just thinking it was some kid who was just wanted another day off. And she said, "I don't know. I'll make the call tomorrow and it'll be on television." And he said, "Please open. I'm so hungry." And that is such a powerful way of telling a story about to demonstrate the need and how critical school lunches are for hungry kids. So as you sort of start to develop your stories, it's a great way to work them into your email program. So multimedia. So if you have a website, having stories on your website is one option. I'm going to show you an example of that. I also really love Medium for storytelling. And then there's video. So Medium.com is an easy-to-use resource for long-form storytelling. And there's a lot of vegan activists out there on Medium. Probably some of you guys are out there already. But it is a really beautiful tool for storytelling because it's very simple to put your text in, put your photos in, anything else you have in there, and it looks really polished, so it's a great way to, if you want to direct people to a multimedia site and you don't have your own website, using Medium is a great tool. But if you have your own website, then think about using that as a place to tell stories. So Farm Sanctuary has some great stuff, no surprise there. So they talk about their rescued animals in their sort of yearly rescued animal rundown, and each one has a little story. And I thought one that I particularly loved was the story about Laverne and Shirley, because they're these 2 sheep that used to belong to a retired nun, but then the nun had to give them up, and so she brought them to Farm Sanctuary, and now they're living out their lives with plenty of help and assistance from Farm Sanctuary in Northern California. So super cute story about Laverne and Shirley. And finally, so there's in-person storytelling. So whether that's in speeches, in conversations, in interviews, maybe with the media, or if you're tabling. thinking about how you can work those stories into those in-person conversations. Again, that's really going to help your audience understand complex problems, get to yes quicker, you're going to inspire, and as we talked about, inspiration means action and engagement. So, I definitely encourage you guys to sort of work these stories into, if you're stopping people on the street and talking about veganism, if you're talking to the media, or even if you're at a dinner party, like a great way to get your point across is by telling a story. And then, of course, there's tabling. So tabling doesn't necessarily have to just be, photo or a couple of words of text. You can actually do a pretty effective job of telling stories and tabling. So here's two examples I really liked. So this photo of the rabbit is really interesting because it tells a story with very little text, right? So this is the face of a rescue. You see right away that this is a rescue animal. You see the organization is the House Rabbit Society, and then you have like the rabbit's name and when it was rescued. So have a whole story wrapped up in one little package of a poster. And then there's one that's like much more clearly a story about this dog named Blue who's alive because of a foster home took him in. And you have the story there. My name is Blue. I'm alive because actually I can't read it because of the webinar controls. I'm alive because I had a foster home. I'm alive because I had a foster home. I'm alive because they made a small sacrifice, a small adjustment to their routine, and welcomed me into their home. I'm alive because they loved me. So those are really awesome examples of storytelling and tabling. I love them. So finding your story. So from here, you guys have some of the tools to think about how you're going to structure your story, what elements it needs to have, where you're going to tell it, how you're going to tell it. So now it's about finding it. And it could be that your story is from personal experience, but it's entirely acceptable for it not to be. You might not necessarily have a personal story, or you might not feel comfortable using your own story yet, and that's totally fine. But if you do, that is a really great relatable way to talk about your personal experience. Maybe something really shocked you into veganism, and so you can tell that story. That's a great example. Maybe like a death or sickness or seeing an abused animal. I don't want to get too grim right now, but those are good examples. About a hero maybe somebody who saved an animal, maybe somebody who really inspires you. As long as you can kind of fit it into that structure, that's a really great way to tell a story. From the news, I was working with a friend of mine who works in around domestic violence issues, and she was sort of struggling about how to reach her audience. And so we talked about the Stanford rape case that happened pretty recently, and how she could use that story about this college kid who went to jail for such a short time for rape to talk to her own audience and sort of pivot, take that story and then pivot and use it as a call to action to support her organization. And then as you're thinking about your story, how does it show solution, need, failure, success, 2 of the 4, 1 of the 4, 3 of the 4? Like, be thinking about that because, you want to use that to inspire. Okay, so we're going to move into the questions period. And I think Leah already has them, so she's going to sit next to me.
Okay, cool. So I haven't had any questions pop up yet. Feel free to add some, or you can use your raise hand function. But I have a question because I think storytelling is a particularly effective tool for us as vegan activists. Probably for the most part, all of us made a choice to go vegan at some point. Unfortunately, probably a lot of us weren't born vegan. And so often we have a story and there's something that flipped us or something that made us think twice. So as new storytellers, what are some of the pitfalls or some of the biggest challenges that you think exist for us as brand new activist storytellers?
Yeah, I think like there are a couple. I think like a story that doesn't really fit into a story structure, so it's not really like it's not a story, right? So there isn't like a character, there isn't a conflict, there isn't sort of a beginning, middle, end, and then a clue. That's sort of that can be a big pitfall because it's just sort of like a statement rather than a story. And also not having a clear call to action. Like as activists, like if you're talking to your audience for the most part, you really should have a clear call to action. And you want to make sure your audience understands that. Like you and experiment with that, right? So like maybe at first you think your call to action is very clear, but you're not having the results and engagement you want. Maybe that means that your call to action isn't working. Test it. Try a different one. See how that goes. Try reworking your story. See how that goes. Like I've told that Jimena Garcia story like a few different ways until I got to the point where I like the structure I used to tell it. And I think also just like again as like you have to practice, right? So you're not gonna knock it out of the park the first time. So try it on your trusted folks, family, friends, colleagues at first, and then as you kind of have it down pat, then use it elsewhere.
Cool. Sounds good. Another question I had, I noticed you use so many great visual examples of storytelling. There was really good imagery. Obviously, there were some great videos. For those of us who are new to this, do you have any tools that you'd recommend we could use to start out with?
Yeah.
Like Instagram, you mentioned.
Yeah. So it kind of depends on where you're working, what you're working on, but I definitely think that taking good photos, there's great resources on the internet to sort of give you good tools for taking a good photo or a good video. Like really today, it is so simple as having a cell phone, right? So you know, there are just a few simple tools that can make the multimedia that you capture so much more effective, whether it is like if you're taking a video, you know, turn your phone sideways if you use an iPhone because then you're going to get a wider screen and then take a better video. If you are using photography, don't be shy about using some of those really super easy to use photo editing apps that you can get, but also don't go too crazy with them because like it can be really obvious and then it doesn't look very good. But yeah, there's some really good sort of multimedia resources out there if you just poke around, like how do I take good iPhone photos? How do I take good video? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I often will just search in the apps function like splicing videos and come up with something like that. We have a couple questions coming in. So Sarah Pickering asks, do you have any favorite examples of or advice on viral videos?
Like my favorite viral videos. Okay, well, so as a communicator, as a professional communicator, I have had to come to the realization that I am probably never in my life going to create a viral video. It's just really hard to do and very unusual, and you kind of just need not just like a good story, but like luck. Right? Like
it seems accidental often.
It does sort of sometimes feel a little bit accidental. So, you know, we don't really think of there isn't really a good way to create a good viral video, but I do think that it's good to stay abreast of what's trending, and that is often just like paying attention to your Facebook and Instagram feeds if that's where you're spending your time. I mean, that's how you're going to know what is trending. Also, I think like always watching your competition, right? So No Kid Hungry definitely considers Charity Water one of our competitors. So like I follow everything they do. I get all of their emails, I follow their Instagram, I follow their Facebook, I follow their Twitter. So like, you know, when you see people doing it well, watch them and pay attention to what's going on in the news, because perhaps if you have a story that's timely and relevant to something in the news, you can use that to pivot and create a broader audience attention. Probably not like viral attention, but definitely it will help bring some relevance to whatever you're using.
Cool. We have a question from Carrie. She says, since a lot of vegan activism is in person, face-to-face, like leafleting, food sampling, college campus activism, which is what a lot of our veg fund activists do, can you give us ideas of how and what types of stories we can use in those situations to engage and influence people?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it is kind of about testing, right? So like you'll have, I can't tell you the exact story that's going to work because I don't know what stories you're using, but I would say, like, if you try some, like, you know, you have, say you have a stable of a few, 3 or 4 stories, and one is like a really grim story, kind of like Buddy's story, that you know, starts out like a huge bummer about an animal being mistreated and then has like a really positive ending. If that works in your conversations, you should use that. If something darker works, you should use that. But it's hard to say what's going to work except through testing and experience.
Okay. Yeah, so just like having conversations.
Yeah.
Because that's often what that ends up being.
Practice, right?
This is a good question from Elizabeth. She says, what affordable camera would you suggest for a video recording? Any ideas?
Affordable.
Of course, affordable being relative, but
yeah, right. Okay, so like our team uses Canon, but obviously that's not super affordable. But I mean, we've used iPhone videos that are totally fine, because if you have an iPhone already, then the videos that it captures, even the past couple of iterations of the iPhone, are pretty strong. You know, the audio on some of the little like handheld video recording devices isn't always very strong. But if it's just visuals, then those are good. Yeah, I think like today we have such great technology from cell phones already that wouldn't be shy with using it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions at this point. Give it a couple seconds. I don't have a question, but want to thank you for a lot of good information. Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, I will just say that I wanted to give you guys my email address. It's elizabethcell123@gmail.com. So feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk more offline with anybody who has other questions. And looks like we actually just got another question in.
What's your favorite or your preferred way to tell or communicate a story?
Oh, that depends on my audience and my objectives and the vehicle I'm using. So, I mean, if I'm at a party and my audience is my friends, then I want to tell like a really big, just animated in-person story. But if I have my druthers with like social media or at an event, I'm always going to want to use a video, because I do a lot of video production. But you definitely want to think about like where you are, what your goal is, who your audience is.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Liz. As many of you may or may not know, this is really our first attempt at doing one of these activist trainings via webinar. And I think this was a perfect way to kick off a series that we hope to continue. Thank you so much, Liz. She has her email there, and I will be sending out an email either end of today or tomorrow with the link to her contact information the videos that we saw today. And if all goes well, hopefully we'll have a link to the video of this webinar, which we'll also be able to share with others. If you had people in your community that wanted to see it but couldn't make it today, hopefully they'll be able to view it like that. So that's it. Thank you all so much for participating. And thanks again, Leslie, for providing our intro. And yeah, we hope to have another one of these soon. Please feel free to send any feedback to conferences@vegfund.org.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks to everyone. And yeah, please feel free to email me at leslie@vegfund.org. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, we would appreciate it.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you.